Have you ever wondered how a simple policy change in one country could send ripples across the entire global financial system? Well, something big is happening on January 1st, and it involves silver. But this isn't just about shiny metal. It's about technology, supply chains, and the very structure of global finance. Stick with me, because what I'm about to share connects the dots between a new regulation in China and potential volatility in Western markets. First, let's understand why silver is so important. It's not just for jewelry or coins. Silver is a critical industrial metal. It's inside your smartphone, it helps power solar panels, it's used in advanced medical instruments, and it's essential for modern manufacturing. China is the world's biggest industrial consumer of silver, using over 6,000 tons every single year. That's more than most countries combined. Now, here's where it gets interesting. On January 1st, China is set to roll out new regulations for its domestic silver market. These rules cover how silver is sourced, certified, and managed. Officially, they're about improving quality and supply chain security. But when a country with this much influence adjusts the rules for a critical commodity, the effects can travel far beyond its borders. To really get what's going on, we need to look at a pattern that has played out before in history. It's a three-step process that rising economic powers often use to gain influence over global commodities. Step 1 is accumulation. It starts with identifying a commodity that is crucial for industrial growth. Then, over several years, entities within that country start quietly accumulating it. This can be through physical purchases, long-term supply contracts, or by building up their own refining capacity. This often happens when prices are stable, so most of the world doesn't even notice a strategic move is underway. Step 2 is building infrastructure. Alongside accumulation, the country develops its own systems for trading and handling the commodity. This means creating domestic exchanges, warehouses, and pricing mechanisms. Over time, this builds an alternative ecosystem, one that runs parallel to the traditional Western-dominated markets like those in London and New York. This gives them a powerful degree of control. Step 3 is policy change. Once the accumulation and infrastructure are in place, new regulations are introduced. These policies are usually presented with reasonable justifications, like ensuring quality standards, environmental compliance, or financial stability. While they don't seem disruptive on the surface, they can fundamentally change how the commodity moves around the world and how physical supply connects with financial markets. We've seen this playbook before. Think back to the 1980s with Japan and semiconductor materials. Japan gained significant control, which put immense pressure on U.S. manufacturers and forced them to completely restructure their supply chains. A more recent and dramatic example is China's rare earth policy change in 2010. At the time, China controlled over 97% of global production. By adjusting export quotas during a period of geopolitical tension, they created an immediate crisis for Western technology and defense industries. Prices for rare earths skyrocketed, supply chains were thrown into chaos, and governments had to step in to stabilize their critical sectors. These historical cases show us that commodity markets are shaped by more than just simple supply and demand. Infrastructure, regulation, and strategic positioning are just as important. Now, let's bring it back to silver. Silver is increasingly fitting this pattern. It's absolutely essential for green energy and high-tech manufacturing, two areas where China aims to be a global leader. As we've discussed, China is already the largest industrial consumer and has massive refining capacity. Over the last decade, China has been busy with Step 2, building its infrastructure. The Shanghai Gold Exchange and the Shanghai International Energy Exchange have become major hubs for silver trading. They've created their own pricing and settlement systems, running parallel to the Western markets. This gives China the ability to influence global silver flows in a way that aligns with its own industrial and strategic goals. This brings us to January 1st and Step 3, the policy change. The new regulations reportedly focus on stricter sourcing standards, reserve requirements for industrial users, and new compliance checks. While the stated goal is quality control and supply security, market analysts are watching very closely. Why? Because these measures could affect the physical availability of silver on the global market. If physical silver becomes harder to get, or if a large portion of it gets concentrated within China's domestic system, it creates a potential problem for the financial world. And that problem has a name: Leverage. Here's how it works. Many large financial institutions don't actually hold physical silver. Instead, they trade derivatives, paper contracts that bet on the future price of silver. They use leverage, meaning they control a large position with a relatively small amount of capital. This is standard practice, but it carries risk. What happens when a new policy in the world's largest consuming nation suddenly makes physical silver harder to obtain? The link between the paper market and the real physical metal gets strained. The value of those paper contracts can become extremely volatile. If prices move sharply, institutions that are heavily leveraged can face massive losses very quickly. They might get hit with a margin call, which is a demand to put up more capital immediately to cover their potential losses. If they can't, they are forced to close their positions, which can trigger a domino effect across the market. Suddenly, you could have a situation where many large institutions are scrambling for cash, creating a liquidity crunch. When this happens, where do they turn? Often they turn to central banks for emergency liquidity to prevent a wider financial crisis. We've seen this happen in the past. Events that look like sudden, unexpected shocks are often the predictable result of these underlying structural shifts that have been building for years. The new Chinese policies might require stricter verification for silver sources and adjust the rules for exporting refined silver. Again, while framed as simple regulatory updates, the effect could be a disruption to the supply flows that Western markets have always relied on. This could force institutions to try and secure physical silver under new, more difficult conditions, putting even more pressure on the system. Now, to be clear, this is not financial advice. My goal is to help you understand the mechanics at play here. This is about recognizing a pattern, the interaction between strategic accumulation, infrastructure development, policy changes, and financial leverage. Whether or not this specific policy shift on January 1st leads to a major market event is not the main point. The key takeaway is that the global commodity landscape is changing. We can no longer just look at supply and demand charts. We have to understand how national policies, physical control of resources, and financial exposure all connect. By understanding these deeper mechanisms, we can better interpret market movements and not be caught by surprise when things suddenly get volatile. In summary, China's new silver policy is significant because it's a perfect example of this convergence. It combines years of strategic accumulation, the build-out of an independent market infrastructure, and now a regulatory shift that could impact global supply. Financial institutions with significant derivative exposure to silver could face real pressure. Instead of just watching the day-to-day price, we should be watching these underlying structural dynamics. This is how physical reality and financial markets intersect in our interconnected world. Thanks for watching. If you found this analysis helpful, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more insights into the forces shaping our global economy.